Let us journey together to a small, pious, and frightened corner of the world, the village of Salem, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The year is 1692. Young in its years as a European settlement, a fragile outpost on the edge of a vast, wild continent. But ancient in its soul, steeped in a faith that saw the devil not as a metaphor for evil, but as a living, breathing, roaring lion, walking the very streets of their village, seeking whom he might devour. It is into this world, this pressure cooker of faith, fear, and frontier hardship, that we must step if we are to understand the mystery that unfolded there. Our story does not begin with a witch, but with a circle of girls. In the harsh winter of 1692, in the household of the Reverend Samuel Parris, his daughter, 9-year-old Betty, and his niece, 11-year-old Abigail Williams, began to behave in a most peculiar way. They, along with their friends from the village, would gather in the kitchen with the family's enslaved woman, a woman from the Caribbean named Tituba. What happened in that kitchen? Was it innocent storytelling, tales spun from Tituba's own childhood? Was it a flirtation with the occult, a simple fortune-telling game with an egg white dropped in a glass of water to see the shape of a future husband? Or was it something darker, something we will never truly know? Whatever it was the spark. Soon, the girls were not just playing games. They were afflicted. They would fall into strange fits, their bodies contorted, their cries incomprehensible. They would crawl under furniture, complain of being pinched and pricked by invisible forces. The village doctor, William Griggs, was called. He was a man of science for his time, but his science had no answer for this. And so, he uttered the words that would light the fuse: "The evil hand is upon them." In that single pronouncement, the mystery was given a name. The afflicted girls, now a growing group that included Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, and Mary Walcott, were pressed. "Who torments you?" they were asked. And they gave names. The first three were outcasts, easy marks. Tituba, the enslaved woman whose tales may have started it all. Sarah Good, a homeless, pregnant beggar known for muttering angrily under her breath as she was turned away from doors. And Sarah Osborne, an elderly, bedridden woman who had scandalized the community by living with her second husband before they were married. These women were interrogated. Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne maintained their innocence, but Tituba saw the writing on the wall. In a series of dramatic confessions, she painted a picture so vivid, so terrifying, that it gave the community the monster it was looking for. She spoke of a tall man from Boston who made her sign his book. She spoke of black dogs, red cats, and a yellow bird that sucked between the fingers of the witches. She described riding through the air on a pole to attend secret meetings, or witches' Sabbaths. Tituba confessed to being a witch. By confessing, she saved her own life. And by confessing, she validated every fear the village held. She gave the mystery its shape. If Tituba's story was true, then a vast, diabolical conspiracy was afoot, not in some distant wilderness, but in their own meeting house, in their own farms. The hunt was on. Now, the mystery deepens. It does not stay with the outcasts. The accusations begin to climb the social ladder. The next to be accused was Rebecca Nurse. She was a saint. A pious, gentle, and respected grandmother of 71, a model of Christian charity. If Rebecca Nurse could be a witch, then anyone could be a witch. This was the moment the terror truly began. If the godliest woman in the community was a servant of Satan in disguise, then the devil's power was absolute, and no one was safe. Her trial and eventual condemnation sent a chilling message: your own good name, your own good works, could not save you. To understand the madness that followed, we must understand the law. To prove witchcraft, the court needed spectral evidence. This was the testimony of the afflicted girls that they could see the specter, or spirit, of the accused, tormenting them, even while the accused person's physical body was elsewhere. "I saw the shape of Goody Proctor," a girl would cry out, writhing on the courtroom floor, "and it pinched me horribly." Think about the implications of this. If you were accused, your only defense was your own word against a ghost. How do you disprove a vision? How do you argue with a nightmare? If the girls said your spirit was attacking them, you were, in the eyes of the court, guilty. This is the central, terrifying mystery of Salem. Was it fraud? Were the girls maliciously settling scores, grabbing land, punishing their enemies? Perhaps. And Putnam Jr.'s family was locked in a bitter feud with the nurses. A pattern of accusing those with valuable property certainly emerged. Or was it something more complex? A form of mass hysteria, a psychological contagion spread by fear and suggestion? Young women in a strict Puritan society had no power, no voice. Suddenly, these girls were the center of attention. Their words sent the most powerful men in the colony to the gallows. Was it a subconscious eruption of repressed anger and frustration? And then there is the question of the accused themselves. Faced with the choice of confessing to a lie and living, or telling the truth and dying, many confessed. They were brought back into the church, their souls saved in the eyes of the community, but they were also used as living proof that the conspiracy was real. Their stories, fed to them by the intensity of their interrogation, became new fuel for the fire. The pressure built through the spring and summer of 1692. The trials were moved from Salem Village to the more prestigious Salem town, and presided over by some of the colony's most learned magistrates, including Deputy Governor Thomas Danforth and the ruthless, zealous William Stoughton. Jails overflowed. Families were torn apart. Neighbor turned against neighbor. And still the girls performed. In the cramped, stuffy meeting house, they would fall into their fits as the accused were brought in. They would cry out in pain, cover their ears, and beg the specters to leave them be. If an accused person so much as shifted their weight, the girls would scream that they were being tortured anew. It was a performance that played to a packed house, day after day. The mystery is, how much was conscious theater, and how much was a self-induced frenzy? Did they believe their own acts? Did they see these visions as real as the wooden floor beneath their feet? By the summer, the first hangings took place, not in Salem, but at a place called Gallows Hill in nearby Salem town. Bridget Bishop was the first to be executed. Then, on a sweltering July day, Sarah Good, Rebecca Nurse, and 3 others were carted out to die. As Sarah Good stood on the ladder with the noose around her neck, the Reverend Nicholas Noyes urged her to confess. She looked at him and uttered her last, furious words, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." Noyes would die 25 years later, choking on his own blood, a fact the believers in the witch's curse would not forget. But even as the bodies swung, doubts were beginning to creep in. The sheer volume of accusations was becoming absurd. The governor's own wife, Lady Phipps, was named. When respected figures like Increase Mather, a giant of Puritan theology, began to publicly question the validity of spectral evidence, the tide began to turn. He argued it was better that 10 witches go free than one innocent person be condemned. This was a direct challenge to the court's logic. By October, Governor William Phipps, under pressure from Boston's elite and increasingly disturbed himself, stepped in. He ordered a halt to the proceedings and forbade any more arrests based on spectral evidence. The court was dissolved and replaced with a new one that would not accept such testimony. The final trials in early 1693 resulted in mostly acquittals. Governor Phipps eventually pardoned the remaining accused. But the reckoning was not over. The toll was devastating, over 200 people accused, 20 executed by hanging. One man, Giles Corey, an 80-year-old farmer, refused to enter a plea, knowing his property would be seized by the state if he was convicted. To force a plea, the sheriff applied a horrific medieval torture called peine forte et dure. He was laid on the ground in a field, and heavy stones were placed on his chest, one by one. For 2 days, they pressed him. His last words, they say, were not a plea, but a command, more weight. He was crushed to death, a martyr to his family's future. And what of the girls? They vanished from the historical record, for the most part. And Putnam Jr., years later, stood in the Salem Village church as a young woman and read a public confession of guilt, begging forgiveness for her part in the being made an instrument for the accusing of several persons of a grievous crime, whereby they were condemned and executed. She wept. The congregation accepted her apology. But the mystery of what truly drove her remains. So, my friends, we are left with the question. Over 3 centuries later, we still sift through the court records, the personal diaries, the sermons, searching for a single, simple answer. Was it a cynical land grab? A case of adolescent hysteria? A symptom of mass psychosis brought on by ergot poisoning from moldy rye bread? A genuine, if misguided, religious war against a very real devil? Perhaps the most enduring mystery of Salem is that it is all of these things and none of them. It is a mirror held up to human nature, reflecting our capacity for fear, our hunger for certainty in an uncertain world, our willingness to believe the unbelievable when it is whispered by a trusted voice. It is a story about what happens when a community loses its collective mind, when the justice system becomes an instrument of terror, and when faith, twisted by fear, becomes a force of destruction. The stones are still there in Salem. The names are etched in memorials. But the true mystery, the one that keeps us leaning in, our firelight flickering on our faces, is not what happened in 1692, but why. And that, perhaps, is a question every generation must ask itself anew. For the shadows that fell over Salem are not confined to one time or one place. They are the shadows within us all. Friends, if you are interested in the true history of the United States without embellishment, subscribe to the Empire of Freedom channel. Click on the bell so you don't miss anything.